Welcome to What Have We Learned? Incidental learnings from interesting people. I'm Ben Punter. I'm very excited for this episode, so I won't keep you because I know you want to get straight into it. This is a very funny stand-up and host of Comedian's Comedian podcast, Stu Goldsmith, and who is direct inspiration for this very podcast. Stu is currently on tour, and you can see him at the Swindon Arts Centre on the 26th of October, the Nottingham Glee Club on the 4th of November, in Birmingham on the 5th of November, and then in Bristol, Aldershot, Corsham, Newcastle and Glasgow, and then at the Cambridge Junction at the end of February. For tickets and details, head to comedianscomedian.com/tour. There'll be a summary at the end of this episode of everything that we have learnt, and do let me know what you have learnt. I would love to hear from you at Ben Punter on Twitter and What Have We Learnt on Facebook. We start with a preamble talking about the humour of my name, Punter, and then we bounce all over the place talking about comedy, touring, Fringe, the podcast, and even hair. This is What Have We Learnt with Stu Goldsmith.
I'm sorry for being casual about your name, but I was very tickled.
It was.
So I use the term punter all the time.
Well, that's weird because I never get. We're recording now, by the way.
Sure.
I never get. I've never, because it's a name I've always grown up with. I've never understood the whole. It's a weird name to some people. So me, it's like, no, that's just my name.
Well, punters to me is a punter is a really cheerfully dismissive way of referring to the audience member upon which the entire economy of my life rests.
Yeah.
So I love the idea of like any there's like, is it Reservoir Dogs? They go, do you kill any people? And he goes, a couple of cops. Any real people? Something like that. So there's a distinction between performers and civilians, or performers and punters. Yeah. And I just like the disrespect involved in punting.
I'll start off with, I heard the Dead to Me, Greg Jenner's podcast.
Oh yeah, the pirate one. Yeah.
And the thing about the pirate names of Captain Flatjack.
Oh yeah,
and Mumbeard. I'm no expert or author, but I've never heard of a better idea for a children's book.
Yeah, right.
Like, stern mum of like.
Mate, I am full of great ideas for children's books that then never get actioned, or. Do you know what I mean? I think everyone has a novel inside them.
Yeah.
I think everyone's got like 50 great children's books in them, but it's just getting around to it.
To the timing. Stu Goldsmith, thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you for joining me. You've made far more effort than I have to get here, so thank you. It's a pleasure.
It's my pleasure. This interview, I had more questions written for this than any other I've done so far, and I didn't know where to start.
You big nerd.
Oh, yeah, I know. you got like the podcasting stuff, you got the Fringe stuff, you got the general stand-up stuff, and then you got the all the sort of the writing and all the comedy stuff.
Sure.
I thought, I don't know where to start. So I thought, that's where I'll start. When you're interviewing someone and you've got 100 questions to ask, what's your go-to? How do I start?
Oh, very nice, very meta. I like it. Well, how do I start? I suppose I get very nervous before the interviews that I do, even when I know the guests very well. I suppose one of my biggest fears is getting caught out somehow. I've got terrible imposter syndrome, and I feel like sort of quite incorrectly my podcast has established me as some sort of comedy expert, which I'm absolutely not, and then I feel like that identity is slightly put on me, and then I need to live up to it somehow. So I worry that if I don't know chapter and verse of someone's entire oeuvre, then I'll get. I mean, the example I always use is I worry that I'll say to David Baddiel, have you ever thought about writing a film? And he goes, I've written a film and it won lots of awards. Like that has almost never happened. I mean, nothing that clanging. So I go in with a lot of nerves, but almost always, as soon as the actual interview begins, those go out the window, because I just remember, this is a human being. Yeah. And really, I would say the best, it's probably some sort of like Derren Brown style technique. The interviews really go wherever they go. I think what I go in with is flexibility. I go in with a certain amount, not really a structure. Often I will have a burning desire. That's the nature of my podcast. I'll go, how does this person do it? How does Tim Vine find continually new angles on this? How does Milton Jones do one-liners, but they exist almost like a Far Side cartoon? They create a mental picture rather than being reliant on puns. How does Patton Oswalt get the amount of detail in his jokes and the honesty that he gets? Those things I genuinely, passionately want to know. So I sort of trust myself that I can start off talking about the price of eggs and get to where I want. Sometimes, like I sometimes say to people, well, let's just get right into it, and I'll just give them something abrupt and challenging early doors. But anyway, the sort of the technique I was talking about is often what happens is I will go in with a burning question, but there's enough flexibility that the interview goes wherever it goes, and then of course, as you know, as a podcaster, you can package it afterwards and go, if you ended up talking about their mum, you can go, this is the big mum interview. Do you know what I mean? So
but then do you ever bring back those sort of the questions you are armed with? You kind of have that sort of in your armoury. You kind of go, right, I can pull out this question because you've mentioned that thing, because I have that question for later on.
A little bit. Sometimes I've just got a terrible memory, so sometimes I will do not an elaborate, but like a sort of a quick mnemonic. I'll be looking at my guest over the way from me in a booth, not a million miles away from this one, and if they say something, my thing is always about what are they glossing over? What are they sort of trying not to say? I think the bits that we naturally sort of skid over or scuttle over are often the things people don't want to talk about. So I'll try and spot them, and then I'll make a little kind of mnemonic of a picture. Like if it's something, you mentioned keys, I'll just try and imagine, whilst sort of following whatever we're talking about, I'll just draw a little key next to your head. So I'll go, when we get back to there's that. And ideally, like 20 minutes later in the interview, you'll say something else related to metal, and I'll go, subject of metal, what was that keys thing you said earlier on? Do you know what I mean? Or something like that. That's in an ideal world, and I only have to do that sort of ludicrous technique because my memory's so bad. There are sometimes, if there is so next week's episode is going to be with Sophie Hagen, who's a brilliant comic, and I went in there with a lot to talk to her about. She is an activist for fat rights and for anxiety, and she's a really passionate person. She wrote a book called Happy Fat. She also... I have known her for a little while, and we will occasionally have little kind of dirty entrepreneurial chats where we go, how would you best market this, that and the other? So into that episode, I kind of went in thinking, that thing you did with gender neutral toilets a few years ago, when it was in the cultural conversation but not massively in it, how much of that was because you urgently wanted it, and how much of it was you being a shrewd marketing person? So I sort of thought, I can't open with that. We'll establish stuff. I'll make her know that I respect her. Not to butter her up, but I think she's a great comic. We'll talk about that. And then as we were sort of coming round to me kind of putting things in position where I could go, we understand you're shrewd, we understand you get marketing, and we know you're good and you like selling tickets. So this thing you did, and she just jumped in and went, oh, that was totally marketing. And I'm like, okay, let's go.
But it kind of opens them up into like a safe space as well.
I think so. Yeah. I think someone described this as, I couldn't have put this better myself. Someone said, I lull people into a genuine sense of security. Do you know what I mean? I don't think that really is. I don't have, and this isn't open to every interviewer or podcaster, but I'm beholden to no one. I am never pressured to interview anyone. If you're my guest, it's because I think you're brilliant. I admire you. And as a result, there's no side to it. I might be thinking, come on, what about this? But that's always couched in, the reason you're here is because I think I can learn something from you.
Yeah, and so with the not being beholden to anyone, do you ever feel that... Because that was one of the questions I had was, do you ever feel that there's some pressure of always having this sort of schedule and routine of getting episodes out? But if you're always...
There is and there isn't. Because I am to a certain extent beholden to my subscribers, because now there are a certain number of people who pay me a small amount, like a micro donation, a Patreon style thing, but using a different system. Orsound, incidentally, it's called. You can go to orsound.com, like awesome but with sound. And I'm a big believer in what Mark does. It's his company and I think he's great, so I'm very happy to mention it. But so I suppose if I didn't release any content for 2 months and didn't say anything, I would imagine they'd all desert me, and quite rightly. But I feel they only support me because they buy me and what I do. So what I do is whatever I do. Do you know what I mean? Like when in my work as a stand-up, which is most of my life, certainly most of my thinking time, I fervently believe that if you book me for X pounds to come and do X minutes at your show, you get whatever I say you get. Because what you're paying for is not that routine and that routine, or that style even. You might have certain expectations about it, but if you're booking me, you get me.
Yeah.
So I would hope that you book me and your audience are interested because they're interested in whatever is interesting me at the time. And that's very much how I feel with the podcast.
And so you mentioned about someone getting nervous before an episode sometimes.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. 310 of them I've done, and I just genuinely can't can't put that down.
Mm.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, okay, what do you think that is, or why is that also, with a side note of that, are you ever starstruck?
Not really starstruck. I suppose it was a bit like, the really big guys with whom I'm not personally acquainted, someone like Russell Brand or Jimmy Carr. It's a bit weird. It's not mega weird. I've gigged with Russell a couple of times back before he was massive. I only really know Jimmy, hardly socially. I've seen him at festivals and I've had a drink with him or something. I've seen a show with him, but we're not mates. And he is so massively all over TV.
Yeah.
I've been in a room with Tom Cruise. I didn't touch him, but I think I made eye contact with him, which I believe is illegal. Yeah. And that was hyper real. That was like, I feel like I'm on acid or something. This is like, that's actual Tom Cruise. So I very, very rarely, and I should say I'm a colossal Tom Cruise fan, so that was probably what it was. Very rarely in the people that I talk to, I get excited. I don't get starstruck. I suppose it's excited mixed with a little bit of fear that they will expect me to have researched their every waking moment to an unrealistic degree. Yeah. And I just have to remind myself, look, no, like if I do an interview with someone and they say, I really enjoy, I listened to the so-and-so episode of your podcast, just that one, I'm flattered. Yeah. I think, oh, that's nice, they've made the effort. This isn't going to be generic, who are you and what do you do? Yeah. And as a result, I really open up to that person, more so than I would be with, the next 100, what do you do, kind of interviews that comics have to do while promoting things. So I know that to charm me, you need to do a tiny bit of research. But then I suppose I am a bit of a people pleaser and I like making other people happy. There are other people. That one of my interviews started with me saying, so what's your show about this year? And they said, well, you've seen it, you tell me. And so that did really put me on the spot. Fortunately, I had things to say, but if I had pretended to have seen it, I'd have really been stuck.
Yeah, and does that confidence then as well come from the years of street performing?
I think street performing was born of confidence and certainly increased my confidence. Maybe it was. I don't like to... Like, it was such a magical thing for me. The street was such a romantic in the sense of, like, it's like doing a heist. It's like being a superhero and being a spy and doing a heist, and you learn secrets about humans, how humans behave. You people watch for ages. You understand how to get strangers to do a thing. It's like it's much more like all of those things rolled into one. It's like being a professional con artist, but a benevolent one. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
you've got all these people to stop for no reason at all.
Yeah, and when I worked, funnily enough, I made it my principle was that it was for no reason at all. I never did anything high up dangerous or particularly impressive, and that was important to me somehow. I think this is an honest thing. Like I can juggle whatever, like 3 burning torches on a 9-foot unicycle, right? Have I ever done that? Yeah, I've certainly juggled clubs on a uni. I'm in my heyday, I would have been a couple of days practice off really getting that nailing to performance standard, and I don't mean to show off. If I was showing off, that would be an absurdly weird thing to show off. I'd be more impressed if I could do the Times Cryptic Crossword. But I could do that stuff, and I can be glib about it. There are people who do it brilliantly, and I'm sure I can't do it as well as someone who does it brilliantly. But it was a badge of honour to me that my finale took place 2 inches off the ground, involving a packet of crisps. Because then it made it explicit to my mind. I felt like I was continually saying to them, look what I've made you do with nothing. I said once, I got I won a prize in the Street Performing World Championships. I think I came 3rd. And part of it was because at the end of our shows, everyone would say, hey guys, once you've paid, go over and fill in your voting slips at that booth over there and vote for who you think is the best performer. And there was the best guys in the world there. Yeah. And there's me with my packet of crisps and my slack rope, like literally a 5 metre length of rope. And I said to the audience, go and fill in that thing, because there are people at this festival who are literally the best in the world, who've trained their whole lives to do the most amazing things. Imagine the looks on their faces if I win with this. And enough of them thought, that would be good. You know what I mean? And so they went and did it. And I love that. So to come back to your question in a phenomenally roundabout way, probably yes. I think that street performing gave me a certain amount of confidence. Not in every situation. I don't have sometimes I have wildly varying levels of self-belief, But certainly, my wife had her phone pickpocketed and on Charing Cross Road, and I instinctively grabbed the guy and said, "Ladies and gentlemen," and 30 people turned around and stopped, and suddenly he had to give it back and run away. Yeah. So, I mean, I wish that happened all the time. He was very old as well. He was no physical threat whatsoever. But so yes, a certain amount of confidence like that. Whether that translates to the confidence that you need in an interview, I don't know. I think interviewing is less about confidence and more about empathy. It's more about genuinely listening, and it's more about going, "Oh yeah, I'm like that," and being able to say, the thing I find myself saying over and over again to my guests is, God, if I was in that situation, I'd be really worried about that. You know, if I had to turn over 50 new jokes a week for Mock the Week, I suppose by the time I'd done the 7th or 8th show, I'd be thinking, God, have I got anything left? And it's those moments when you manage to, you sort of strike oil with something that they have thought, and they go, God, yeah, I know. And suddenly you're in a different realm of conversation.
Because there's a point that was raised, I think it might have been on the 300 episode with yourself and Sarah Millican, about preferring work in progresses to polished final shows. And I'm exactly the same now. It's hard to say. I mean, I saw Trevor Noah at the O2 Arena. Trevor Noah is a brilliant comedian. He did a great show.
Sure.
But the problem there was he was on after 2 warm-up acts. And I think the great thing about the Fringe as well is you go there, you pay to see the act, and they're on first. That's the act you get paid to see. Paid to see. And then with the work in progress is you see that same act, but you see the nuts and bolts. You see them, how they're putting it together, and I'm fascinated by. That's more interesting.
And I think, given that, I totally agree. And I think, given that stand-up, when you see it, like the vast amount of stand-up out there, on recorded media is packaged, whether it's poorly packaged on YouTube or brilliantly packaged on YouTube or proper TV stuff. It's packaged, and I don't mean it's edited in the sense of they've made something funny that wasn't, although that is arguably possible. It's more that you are insulated from it, and that's a million miles away. I used to go, and before any comics knew who I was, I'm no one, but my point is, like, before I was a comic and I was certain that the person performing didn't know who I was or anything, I used to sit front and centre for every single comedy show. I wanted the sweat to be flicking on me. I wanted to get right in there. I loved it when it went wrong. I'd see Simon Munnery 3 or 4 times a year sometimes to see how he coped with the latest technical nightmare in the middle of the latest phenomenally inventive flight of fantasy. So I think that there is so much perfectly recorded, shiny, glistening stand-up out there now that the Edinburgh Festival has become the Olympics of stand-up, and everyone goes there having trained their whole lives and waited 5 years so they can be newcomer technically, and all that kind of mentality. I'm much more interested in seeing someone kind of reach, that Jerry Seinfeld metaphor about how for a joke to be perfect, the cliffs need to be exactly the right distance apart. If the cliffs are too close together, you just step across, there's no danger. If the cliffs are too far apart, you fall
down.
So for a joke to work, you have to just make it and that makes it, he means that in terms of the audience's understanding. They need to just get the idea at the right time. And it's a good way to sort of analyse jokes and sort of structurally critique them. I think in the same way, what I want to see of a performance is someone just make it. And if they, like that, when we see clowning, when you see Zach and Vigo or Spencer Jones, what you're wanting to see is someone go, oh God, this is a bit out of my control. I might not make it. Now, I'm not that type of a performer, but I'm going into my management's office on Thursday this week to go and have a big conversation about exactly what the next move is. Given that this year in Edinburgh, I had a projector screen, I was doing a work in progress, I had a projector screen on stage with 50 words on it, which changed every day as I continued writing and rewriting the show, and I would leap and leap and leap from one bit to another. It goes against some of my instinct because I want the show to be glistening and ready, but honestly, the amount of people who crossed the street to tell me it was their favourite show they'd ever seen of mine, and they've been coming for a few years, really made me go, well, I enjoyed it more. It was a more fun process. Everyone said, this is your best thing. So I am starting to think now, and given, let's remember the landscape, the riskiest thing you can do in comedy, in art or whatever, is play it safe. Why have I...
Risky.
why would I shut down all this glorious profusion of sort of kind of wet organic creativity in order to go, no, we've got to pop it all in a suit so that we can go on a shiny floor, when actually, like, what are we here for? My other big revelation is we all die. Do you know? It's like, I know some of us knew this, but the amount in the last few years of stand-up comedians who have died, and what happens is on Facebook there's a period of mourning and celebration for 5 days, or longer or shorter, and then everyone just gets on with their lives. For some reason, that plus having children recently has made me sort of go, I mean, you only get one go, and I'm halfway, so why would I do anything that doesn't totally make me think, whoa, this is good? If you jump out of a plane for a living, which in some ways is what I do, in some ways,
the cliff,
then, well, yeah, exactly, yeah. Why would you? Yeah, I don't know. If you jump out of a plane for a living, why would you do it lower down? Do you know what I mean? Like, that's the whole point. This is the whole, like, that feeling of being on stage and going, whoa, holy shit, here we go. That's what the whole job is. That's all the social life sacrifices I've made. That is in order to get that. So why are we going to get that and go, well, obviously, I mean, the answer is money and fame, which is money, and options, which are money. And richness of life. It's like, do you want to? I'm rehearsing arguments now for this meeting. Not that they've come down anyway, but I'm kind of imagining arguments. Like, if the job is have an excellent creative time and inspire people and have a wonderful time, then let's just keep doing this rather than trying to be the same as everyone else.
So there's a couple of things there. With this is it. This is all you get. There's a great line from what's his name, Craig Ferguson. Who says, in the end, you end up as a dash. You have a start date and an end date and then a dash in between.
Nice.
And this is the dash. That's always going to you'll be on a Wikipedia page or on a tombstone or in a book. Start date, end date, dash. This is the dash. What do you want to do?
Yeah.
That's the way to put that.
Very nicely put, yeah.
And then with the work in progress stuff, when you talk about the projector screen in the work in progress, I've never seen that in a work in progress before.
No.
Because normally it's very much I've got a book of notes, or I've got a notepad I'm going to skim through. It felt very polished, packaged as a work in progress show.
Yes. Do you mean my one this year?
Yes.
Yes. So the other thing is, thank you. I can't help but polish things. That's from the street. You do a gag 1,000 times. By the end of it, it's perfect. You know. So I agree with you. I also think as well as the projector screen, the fact that I'm making notes into my phone, which I genuinely listen back to the following morning, I have a relationship with future me, which is something I've written jokes about in my last and current tour. The relationship between future Stu and previous Stu, and how one can't rely on the other having made decisions. Yeah. But being able to talk to them and having this other thing of like, there's the projector, there's the audience, here's me, and here's me making notes for future me. Yeah. That kept the ball in the air constantly. Yeah. And it was really fun and exciting, and I loved it.
I've really enjoyed the recorder elements, because I think that's such a clever way of going, here's an avenue for more comedy and more gags. If a joke doesn't work, I've got this backup.
Sure.
I can say, they didn't like that joke.
Totally.
And it stays.
In some ways, it fulfills the same function as the Eddie Izzard scribbling something out on the back of his hand.
I'll
never do that again. You know, in some ways it does that. In other ways, it is a genuine note to self, and it's clearly, I think, born of the fact that I'm a bit scatty, and that's quite that's playing against the desire to polish and actually celebrating the scattiness. And also, it kind of uses my massive self-involvement as it kind of weaponizes that in a guerrilla way. You know, like in comedy, as in guerrilla war, you take what's wrong and you turn it into a positive. Well, one of the things that's wrong is I'm massively self-involved. So if I talk to myself and then get lost in my reverie talking to myself in the future, and then have to fess up and go, whatever, I took a couple of times I took it too far, and I would just look at them and go, so my new t-shirts say redefining self-indulgence, do you know what I mean, or something like that. You know, I'm giving myself a new problem that I have to work with. So yeah, you know, I do understand the counter arguments, which are that in order to get the eye of TV, you need to go, look, I'm capable of turning in a finished product. But I have to have a wider conversation about what are we aiming for next? What do I, as the person I am and the agent I am and all the rest of it, have to bring to the table in a variety of different places? Yeah. Would I be happier being at festivals and people going, "Wow, this is the groundswell of the stuff." This is all the people are going to go and see it because it's special and people are buzzing and talking about it. Or is it better to go? I mean, I don't mean to sort of do down nicely packaged, chopped up stand-up that's ready for Netflix, but I've got to be realistic about what I think is available to me. And then, whilst I'm being realistic, one of my biggest problems is I never dream big enough. I've got just all. Some people go to Edinburgh as new comics and go, right, how can I use this as a springboard to the next thing? I went to Edinburgh 26 years ago and thought, how can I come here every day, every week for the rest of every day, week, whatever, every year for the rest of my life? I don't want to miss this because this is all the best stuff in one place going off. And so without meaning to, I can look back now and go, oh, what I did was I made myself part of the furniture at Edinburgh. I'm part of the ecology of the Edinburgh Festival, because now every time I'm there, I'm running around, seeing stuff, recording podcasts, loads of newer acts are going, can you come and see my show? I have some of the positive qualities of being a comic, I have some of the positive qualities of being a reviewer, but none of the negative ones. I can genuinely help people. I get lovely messages from people going, whoa, you sent loads of people to my show. I love it. What's bigger than that? I don't know if there's an equivalent. I don't know if you can run round Hollywood being useful to people.
Just for Last Montreal hasn't got that kind of same feel either. It hasn't got that kind of run around element to it.
Well, I mean, have you been?
No, but I'd like to.
I've been 3 times, and it sort of does. It does when I'm there, because I love legging it around the place, going, have you seen that? Have you met them? Oh, you two should meet to each other. You should talk to each other. I'm not doing it in a high-level agent way where I'm connecting someone with their next Netflix opportunity, but I love being there. And the times I've done live versions of my podcast there, and I mean, the year I interviewed Patton Oswalt, in the audience were Jimmy Carr, Sarah Millican, Russell Howard. Do you know what I mean? And I was just sort of sat there, and there was a lovely moment. You can hear it on the recording. I can't remember how many episodes ago. Patton goes, he starts talking to the. I mentioned to him beforehand, there's a bunch of British comics in. I meant arena-filling British comics. Yeah. He hasn't necessarily heard of them. So he was like, and you comics in here, you'll know this. And in a very lovely, gentle kind of treating them as if they're open micers. It was just a really wonderful kind of turn of phrase given the component of the audience.
And so it's a question I have for the end normally, but I'm going to put it in now because you've mentioned it. Why is Edinburgh so special?
It's so special to me because I've spent over 2 years of my life there over the last 26 years. I have fallen in love there. I've fallen out of love there. I've had ludicrous adventures. I've, not throwing TVs out of windows, but that kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, It's been rock and roll to me. I helped stop a riot there once. And so very much like putting a TV back in through the window. So it has that kind of life element to it, where in some ways it's like my mum's garage that I've been allowed to put a purple light bulb and a sofa in. It's that. It feels mine. On the other hand, it is just the meeting point for not all of the people, but a substantial number of people who've had a great idea or a terrible idea and are just believing in themselves and trying it. It's the workbench for everything. Yeah. And I've seen some of the most extraordinary things there, and there is always there's always the possibility that the next thing you go and see is going to be this year's thing that makes me feel like a 16-year-old again. It's going to be this year's John Robertson's The Dark Room, or this year's Fuerza Bruta, or this year's Circus of... No, it wasn't Circus of Horrors. What was it? The Jim Rose Circus Sideshow. I saw there when I was about 17. I got my T-shirt signed by Jim and the Enigma afterwards. There are just some of the moments in my life, some of the best moments in my dash, some of the moments where I felt plucked like a string and gone, oh God, this is what being alive's about, happened at the Edinburgh Festival.
The closest thing I can compare to that was I saw... Do you know Rob Kemp?
Yes.
I saw his show Elvis Dead 2 years ago, and it was...
I was silent there, and I always feel bad if I don't say something good. Like, oh great, I know and like Rob very much, but I have not seen his show. I haven't seen any of his work, just by dint of clashing.
Oh, that's fine. So I had tickets for... It was like a compilation show for like Best of the Fringe, midnight showing somewhere, and then I saw online this online buzz for, you got to go see Elvis Dead, you got to see Elvis Dead. I was like, well, I paid £5 for that one, and it starts in midnight, like... And I went to see the show, and it was like, we've got no tickets. The only tickets we've got is tomorrow at midnight. I went, but I've got tickets for the highlight show. Like, forget the highlight show, we're going to Overstead. So I went and saw it, and it's probably one of the best shows. That energy, that kind of... obviously there's an element of, I'm not supposed to be in this room right now, I'm supposed to be somewhere else. But also, it was so different. It was like, how has no one done this before?
Sure.
How is this... Why does this work? Why does this work so well? And it was a tiny room, and the atmosphere in that room, I was sat in front of... I had Robin Ince sitting right in front of me as well. There was an element of like, why are all the comedians here? Yeah. All the comedians here are here. There must be something going on because...
Well, that's what buzz is. This is a pet theory of mine. When people go, how can I generate buzz? All this buzz about my show. Buzz is when comics like your show and tell people. And it's the only thing you can trust because comics don't have a financial stake in your success. You can't get buzz from a PR. You can't get buzz from your agent. Of course they're going to tell everyone you're brilliant. But if Nish comes to see you or, whoever, a comic who is well known and loved among comics, and they go, dude, you've got to see this. Yeah. Then everyone's like, whoa. And then a load of comics go and see it. And then all of those comics go, hey, following, you've got to go and see this. And that's where it comes from. And it's just sort of impossible to create artificially.
My version of that for this year was Beck Hill.
Yeah, right. Yeah, great.
It was just like, so I went with 3 friends and I went on my own first time and I said, you got to go see it. And I
saw it in preview and I really enjoyed it. And as I understand it, it shifted several gears up after that. Yeah.
It starts like a normal, it almost starts like there's a false start to it. And it's like, is it going wrong or is this supposed to be happening? And it's like, no. And then you realise by the end, like, all of this has been organised. Yeah. And it's like, and it's layers within layers within layers. It's someone talking to themselves in not just one different way, 3 different ways. Oh, well, this is just a little bit brilliant now. Yeah. And I told my friend, and they saw it, and they had complete different responses. One said, it wasn't really for me. Sure. But that's because they don't really understand sci-fi. They don't really understand sort of that kind of humour. Maybe they want to see something different.
Yeah, if you're not into the genre of time loop, it could be a hard watch. Yeah.
But friends saw it, loved it. I think it's one of my best shows, The Fringe, for this year, certainly. So the show I saw this year that you did, there was a moment in it which I'm willing to cut this out. If this doesn't, obviously there's without giving anything away, there is you plant a story about an audience calling out, then the audience calls out something, and then you worked out in the show I saw, that you can actually call back to the audience. Yes, that's the one I saw, and it was just this feeling in the room of like, by Jove, he's got it.
Yes, it was, but what he had by Jove got was that idea, which seeing me have that idea and going, I could make a connection there, is very satisfying, because what is comedy if it isn't just the comic going, thing A, thing B, oh God, I could make a connection there, at the same time as everyone else is thinking it, I tried it, but what happened, we can talk about the bit. So I tell a story. Sometimes in the show, I would be benevolently heckled, and I would tell us, there's a track I would get on sometimes where I'd go, oh, that's nice. I'm very lucky I get benevolent heckles. And that kind of began to be a bit, and I would tell a story about being at Glastonbury Festival, losing my place in the middle of a set and someone shouting, go on, Stu. In previous shows, and I maybe have done that 20 times over 40 iterations of the show. Well, maybe not as many as 20. Once I mentioned that, later in the show, if there is any kind of fuck up, some wag will think to go on, Stu, and get a huge laugh. And I have tried a few variations, because it's happened a few times, but 15 odd times. I've tried variations of how can I somehow get a topper off their laugh, because I'm a wheedly little guy and it's hard to let the audience have that laugh, but it's always better to let the audience have that laugh. One time I think someone said, go on, Stu, and I gave them the laugh, and then 10 minutes later someone else said something else that was quite a good heckle, and that got a laugh, and then I went, go on, audience, and it pinged back. Was it that? Is that the one you saw? Sure. Yeah, great. That was lovely. It's one of those things that I can't stage manage, and what I can do is deliver the components and then get on with the show, and if there's a happy accident, that's lovely. And again, I mentioned Derren Brown again. I believe one of his most personal effects works on the basis that it's one of those things where there is a thing and you basically make a wild guess, and if it doesn't work, no one knows that you've made a wild guess. But if it does, they just can't believe it, and something magic's happened. I think Simon Munnery had something similar. I saw him years and years ago, and at one point he says, "Does anyone? Do you ever?" And he said, "Do you ever just feel completely alone And I spoke to him about it, and every so often, one person would go, yeah. And then he'd go, just you. Like, do you know what I mean? Like that. But it's not the sort of thing you can stage manage. All you can do is set up the conditions and then hope the magic happens in one way. And if it doesn't, the point of the whole eternal work in progress, and we are at a stage now where what I'm planning to do, one of my plans is that I do work in progress for the rest of my life. I just never call it that. And it's when you come and see me, that's what you get, is me working out stuff. Well, Ross Noble can do his version of that, and Eddie Izzard can do his version of that. So, there's no rules. So it may be that rather than trying to trim it down, as is my deep street performer nature, trim it down into a joke that'll save me, that'll be perfect every time. No. Trust that I am funny, and funniness is funny, and I'm in it and of it, and maybe something even more wonderful will happen 100 further tries down the line.
So this year was at Monkey Barrel.
Yeah.
Is that a new venue? Is that
Monkey Barrel itself has existed for 2 years. Last year they added a second smaller room to the first one. This year they added 3 additional rooms over the road to the first 2.
Yep.
So the organisation's been around for a couple of years. Now it's got 5 venues, and I hope it keeps getting more venues. It's brilliant.
Is there ever like a venue in Edinburgh that you've gone, I'd love to play there?
Assembly Hall. Yeah, was that 1300?
Yeah.
Is that Assembly Hall, or the McEwen Hall? I think is probably bigger, but the McEwen Hall's sort of cavernous in a way that I think it'd be less fun to play. I think Assembly Hall, like the one on the Mound, that's got to be. I mean, there's loads. I've done gigs there. I've done 10 minutes here and there in line-up shows, but that one would be all right. But there we go. Not dreaming big enough. I didn't say the EICC, did I? That feels like the biggest reasonably fringe venue. Also, I'd love to, if I really had the profile, if I 10 years from now was massive, I'd love to do something outdoors. I remember seeing Eddie Izzard and my friends Vince Henderson and John Feely do a thrown together street show. They're all mates from Covent Garden back in the day. This is only maybe 13 years ago or so, maybe 15 years ago. So Eddie was massive, and there was just this in the Wireworks, which hasn't been the Wireworks for a long time. It's by the Fringe box office. It's now a big metal shed, but there was you would go through one of the little ginnels off the high street, and there would be a little space. Now, you couldn't normally do a street show there because you couldn't get a crowd and bring them through. But all you needed to do was just stand outside and go, Eddie Izzard's doing a street show. And everyone's like, what? And they did a brilliant improvised 3-hander show that they'd come up with in the pub last night and just kind of played it. And it was magic. And I remember thinking, that is such a lovely thing for Eddie to do, to still be so connected despite his enormous global fame. To be connected enough to the world of street shows that he wanted to just come out and play on the street. And I'd love to do that I can do that now, and often don't get round to it because I've got other pressing things on. But if I had unlimited resources and fame, it would be lovely to swank in and go, hey guys, let's hey other street performers. I mean, he did it with a tremendous amount of class and his old friends. I think I'd do it like an absolute wanker.
I found out about a new venue today which I'd never heard of. It's the airport terminal venue.
Sounds local.
It's near the car park of Edinburgh Airport.
Okay.
I'm like,
I imagine it's easily accessible by tram. That tram journey is fantastic. I know the city doesn't like the tram, but I think it's brilliant.
I think it's good as well. I don't know why people shit on it so much.
Yeah. Well, you could include tram ticket as part of the price, or something like that. Yeah, that's quite a fun thing.
Do comedy on tram.
Plus, if you were, if it was like, if your show was sort of themed about the future, people could arrive by tram. You could have your own stop. That'd be quite good.
So you're on tour from the time of the recording next week.
Yes.
How do you feel about it? Are you excited?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a weird one because the first leg, we split the tour into 2 legs for the first time, and the first leg of the tour was places close to home, and the second leg of the tour, which I'm embarking upon now, is places like Aberdeen. Literally Aberdeen. It's a real mix of places I'm excited to go to for the first time. Teignmouth, I love the room at Teignmouth Pavilions. Aberdeen Comedy Festival will be loads of fun. All the stands, some stands and some glees are in there. Those are fun. And similarly, there are places that are kind of like the Westie in Aldershot or the Junction in Cambridge or Swindon Arts Centre, where I'm just like, I always have a good time here. So, yeah, absolutely can't wait. And what will happen in the show is I will do the tour show, which is last year's Edinburgh show. It's called End Of. That's the hour. Then there's an interval, before which I explain there's going to be new stuff, so come back after the interval. And then I'll do 40 to 60 minutes of new stuff, including some all or none of primer. So the fun bit for me will be not just resting on my laurels of the stuff that you saw, but kind of going, okay, those 3 bits are good enough now that I shouldn't really let myself do them unless I get in a jam. So I want to be continually turning stuff over. So it takes although the first half of the show, that will be fun for me because I'll be doing stuff that's well honed and that I've done 60 times. And then the second half will be super unpolished and had all the varnish stripped off it. And so it's, I realised the other day, I'm never bored. I think I used to be bored sometimes as a teenager, and I'm just never bored. I'm often scared, but I'm never bored.
Because obviously if you're doing 2 separate hours, you'll have that first hour to kind of sort of pull apart the audience. It's kind of like, they're this kind of crowd, to maybe figure out what you want to do in the second hour.
Potentially, but I don't know how much stock I personally hold in that, because I think that is... Well, that suggests that it's all a lot more kind of nuanced and deliberate than it actually is. It's much more me kind of going, I'm going to do this now, and I'm going to make you come along with it. Now, I might in the first half go, oh God, they're not really up for it. They're a bit either older, or they're a bit... I don't mean older as a bad thing in itself, but maybe we've got less in common, so I might have to attack things from a different direction, or maybe they're a bit starchy or what have you. But even then, it's not like I wouldn't select what I do in the second half based on what I think they'd like. Yeah. I select what I do in the second half based on what I'm excited about.
Right.
And damn the fools who paid money to see me.
And excluding the obvious of missing family, what's the hardest part of touring?
Thank you for excluding the obvious. It's definitely missing the family. I suppose it is isolating. I am pretty small beer as a touring act. I'm first couple of rungs, so I can't afford a tour manager or a... forgive me, I choose not to employ a tour manager or support act. So it can be isolating, but in all honesty, I don't... Like, not having someone who... it would be nice to have someone set the room up beforehand so that I could look out the window and eat an apple. But it would be really nice when it's gone well to come backstage and high-five someone. That would be really nice. And then travel back with them, because there's the energy, the adrenaline sluices out of your system 40 minutes later, by which time, most of the time, I'll be on the road with 2 or 3 hours ahead of me still. And the isolation is one thing. I'm so busy all the time that I just listen to podcasts, not even comedy podcasts anymore. I listen to podcasts about things I don't know about, like, notional things like property and investing and what do stocks and shares actually mean. And, I always thought I'd try and learn a language, but I've never known anyone actually get round to that. What I like to do is sort of learn things that I always considered a closed book. Probably before too long, I'll start taking an interest in sport.
So I did an interview earlier, and I have that person ask a question to you.
Yep.
And
who are they? Do they know me?
They did know you. Oh. Jennifer Tyler. They did a show at the Edinburgh Fringe called Ready or Not. This is a question from Jennifer Tyler. Here's a question to you.
Hi, Stuart. I love your podcast. Thanks so much for doing it. It's grand. And all your work. My question for you is, what are those magic moment memories that you have of shows that you've seen or that you've done yourself, those magic moments that you look back on and just make you so excited for comedy and for what you do, and to keep ploughing on forward with spreading the love of comedy?
Hello, Jennifer. Thanks. What a lovely question. What are those magic moments that I've kind of seen or done myself that make me want to keep going? Well, it's all about those, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, I suppose, frustratingly, we've just covered this in the interview, but that bit when people would shout, "Go on, Stu," like, that's a lovely thing. Giving people the chance to be brilliant themselves, that's very satisfying. I'd like to do more of that, but it is against my nature as someone who wants to be the star. It's just full of it. I see magic moments everywhere. I'm like the kid from The Sixth Sense, but for really good bits. I really do. And I think one of my predilections is that there's one of my things that I do all the time is I archetypalize things. I treat the world as if it's this huge fairy story, and of course it's meaningful that the man with the beard was in the yellow booth, like stuff like that. I just see that everywhere. It's just the way I see the world. So I suppose in comedy, yeah, God, just constantly, like, little mistakes, little moments, little real. I'm seeing Zach Zucker did a show called Jack Tucker Comedy Stand-Up Hour, where he's a clown and he does the character of a stand-up comic. So it's a clown playing at being a stand-up comic, and his co-creator Johnny Woolley would play live sound effects in to screw him up all the time, and there'd be 9 people who'd walk out. And they'd do a lighting cue and a machine gun noise and everything. And you'd be going, if they set up, did they get 9 students to come and watch every night and then walk out? And they didn't. But so things like that, I suppose. I mean, they'd all be, I don't know, it's sort of hard to describe. They'd all be moments that either you've seen them or you haven't. I mean, the one I always think of is the Dark Room, when John Robertson at the beginning of the Dark Room came out and said, I stumbled into this thing halfway through the run and it was rammed daytime, underground, and he was playing the audience walk-in music was I'm Still Alive from Portal, and I went, hello, I know that, why do I, that's from Portal. It's the best computer game, I think. And he came out in this kind of head rig with these torches on his face and said, how many of you have been to see the Dark Room at this festival before? And everyone went nuts, and I went, what is going on? What have I missed? So that was very special. And then bringing it back to street performing, I saw Anthony Livingspace, who is one of the best street performers in the world. I wrote my dissertation about him when I was in college, and now he's my friend. And he did a wonderful thing where he was working in Hunter Square, near the Tron pub. Yep. And before they could throw him out, he does sort of following silent clowning stuff with sound effects. Really improvisational, really vivid and fun. He sort of walked in, and he just kind of sauntered in and then ran out with one of their ketchup bottles and just started flicking ketchup everywhere. And it was just the maddest, it isn't technically a joke, it was this ludicrous, anarchic act of daring. And I was watching it on the final day of Edinburgh with a load of my mates who are or used to be street performers, and it was just, it's things like that. You just go, this is us, and it's of us, and it's for us, and it's for everyone, and it's special, and constantly. I'm pleased to say that my life is absolutely filled with things like that.
For me, my Edinburgh magic moment, if that's the category, is I went to the Caves Just the Tonic, and I was in the toilet, and there was 3 cubicles, 2 urinals and 2 sinks, and every single one of them was occupied by someone wearing a cape. And I was like, I don't know what's going on. I didn't know there was a dress code. What's going on here?
Glitch of the Matrix, love it.
A new section I'm not particularly going to continuing adding. I had so many questions added into this whole interview that I had a section of weak rejected questions, so quick fire weak rejected questions.
I love it.
I don't like these questions.
Okay.
I wrote these, I don't like them.
Sure. Consider them disavowed.
What was going on with the Everyone's Comedian pilot?
Perfectly valid question. Nothing is happening with it. No one was interested in it, and no TV companies were interested in it, but no one took it up, and those doors are all now closed. I believe it belongs to me, and I'm trying to get hold of the footage that we recorded for the actual pilot to show at a live event sometime, but no time soon.
I hate this question. How much of your hair is a part of your own brand?
Oh, it's a good question. I have got big hair, because I like it, and I like that I look unusual. I don't look like I work in a... Oh, these days everyone looks like they work anyway. But I have a very generic face, and I've done jokes about this and people laugh, so I know it's true. One of the gags is I look like your brother's friend, and that normally I just okay, thanks.
That's very good.
So I partly the hair was a response to, I just noticed when my hair got big and wild one time, then someone after a gig went, hey, I really enjoyed that gig, rather than, did you see the comedian? Which has happened in the past. So in some ways, yes.
Have you ever had a great guest or great episode that you felt personally disappointed by as an interviewer?
Probably. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but probably. And I've got very high standards of myself, and what normally happens with the pod is I go, what about this one? Is this all right? And everyone goes, God, best one ever. And I go, sure.
And then the opposite, the happiest you've ever been with an episode.
Oh man, Pete Holmes. The Pete Holmes one. It's about 5 or 6 episodes ago, live at Montreal. It was my 3rd time there. I felt very comfortable and happy. I was nervous as ever. I'm a huge fan of Pete's, and I think my first 3 questions, before each of his first 3 answers, he goes, God, that's a great question. Like, he really gets on board with me and what I'm trying to do, and it gave me so much confidence. 10 minutes later, I had to remind myself I was in the middle of an interview, because I might as well have been in a warm bath being massaged by a brilliant comic.
And also, it was going to be, do you listen to any other podcasts? But we've already covered that.
I do. The ones I listen to are Boards, Gore and Swords, which started off as a Game of Thrones podcast and now recommends other TV shows. But Ivan Hernandez and Red Scott have a brilliant relationship, and they are my constant friends on the road. I also listen to the NPR Politics podcast and Reply All and It Could Happen Here, which is a brilliant documentary series about the possibility of there being a civil war in America under the current political conditions. And something else brilliant recently. What did I start listening to? Oh, the Mike Winnett podcast, which is fascinating. And if you're listening to this and you are a power-hungry, ambition-crazed stand-up comedian, you should download Mike Winnett's episode with the most hated salesman in the world, because it basically teaches you, if you want to, how to get your foot in the door anywhere, and it's dirty.
And finally, who inspired you to start the podcast? Because obviously the podcast has inspired many other people and many other copycats. Who has inspired you to actually start it?
I was inspired to start it predominantly by a TV programme called Show Me the Funny, which constantly interviewed me and a bunch of other comedians, not about comedy, and it was largely born of frustration that we had 10 really talented people in a room and they kept going, so you're a bit worried about the competition from Dan this time? And if I'd watched loads of RuPaul's Drag Race at that time, I'd have gone, oh, I get what this game is. Sure, yeah, I'm really worried about him. You know what I mean? As it was, I was like, you idiots, you told us this was going to be MasterChef for comedy. Why don't you ask us what was in our heart when we wrote a joke? Not once. So that inspired me to do the opposite of that.
Stuart Goldsmith, thank you very much.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much to Stu for this episode, and thank you very much to the Engine Shed in Bristol for the recording space. Stu is currently on tour at the moment, and you can see him at the Swindon Arts Centre on the 26th of October, and then in Nottingham, Birmingham, Bristol, Aldershot, Corsham, Newcastle and Glasgow, and then at the Cambridge Junction at the end of February. comedianscomedian.com/tour for those details there. So, what have we learnt? We've learned that everyone has a novel inside them, plus an extra 50 children's books. Visualise your questions and let your interviews go where they need to go. Lull your guests into a genuine sense of security. Interviewing is less about confidence and more about empathy and listening. Edinburgh is now the Olympics of stand-up and a meeting place for those who have a great idea. It's impossible to create artificial buzz. Take what's wrong and turn it into a positive. The riskiest thing you can do is play it safe. We all end up as a date, a dash and a date, and this is the dash, so go be a professional cliff jumper and never look Tom Cruise in the eye.